Welcome to another episode of Barman Saturdays, and this week I say I take a look at The Wind in the Willows by Burbank Animation Studios, released back in December 13th of 1988, which means it actually was released, within 2 weeks of my birthday. So I was born back in November 30th of 1988, which oddly means I've gave out more personal information than I'm usually willing to share with my coworkers right now. Because they'll ask me sometimes, like, how old are you? And I won't tell them. Like, I'll go deathly silent and just go back to doing other things. And some of the managers will be like, we can just look up your personnel file, right? Like, we can find out how old you are, if we want to. I'm like, you can go do that, but I'm not making it easy on you just because you can tell me you can look it up on your computer. You can go do the detective work. I don't have to share any of that information with you. Because I just do not like answering personal questions too much usually. But I thought it was somewhat interesting, considering it's so close to when this film came out. Admittedly, that's probably the case for lots of films when you think about it, considering, there's thousands of films that get released, all the time, because there's movie studios all over the world, and you have people that can make, films rather easily nowadays with their own phones, so having a film released near your birthday within a couple weeks is not very unusual, but still thought it was something of an interesting tidbit for talking about this film. Though I will admit, this review isn't so much for the Burbank version of the film, because I know it doesn't have the sound issues that this version does, because this is the Digiview Productions release. Digiview decided to prominently put their name on the DVD there. Don't know if you can read it super clearly, because, everything on the disc has to be, like, green and stuff like that. I don't know why they wanted that tint, because the best I can come up with is maybe it's a nod to the book released back in like 1908, but that was more of a bluish green, so like a teal maybe. Well, this one, is kind of jaundiced in looking or something. I don't know, but it's not a very good look. And the sad part is, the characters themselves in the movie are not that color. You can see Mr. Rat there. He's very gray, but why the green on the box? No idea. But yeah, for Digiview Productions, my opinion of this is just do not buy it. Like, if you're getting the Burbank Animation Studios version from someone else and they don't have the problems this does, I'd say it's decent. I mean, it does, reuse animation sometimes, to save costs at times. Like when Mr. Toad is driving down the road and we see the same, trees on the side of the road, for a couple seconds, as he just keeps driving by at high speeds. Stuff like that, to save costs. I'm kind of used to it, from Burbank. They do try and make animations on the cheap side, so, reusing, imagery like that doesn't surprise me. And they do it in some other portions of the film, too. That's just one of the more memorable ones because, it stands out so much that why are the trees on the side of the road the same, every few seconds? It's just very, noticeable. But the reason why the Digiview Productions re-release is terrible is that they jacked up the sound like really high for the background music and background noises to the point where you sometimes can't even hear the characters, and even when you can hear them, if they're playing background music and stuff, it can be really faint and harder to hear them than I particularly am fond of. And I know this isn't a fault with Burbank Animation Studios. They actually did a pretty solid, sound, setup, so why the Digiview version has these issues, I'm not entirely sure, because I would assume they just would have copied it, onto disc, from some other source material. So maybe they got a bad copy somewhere, or maybe someone, was messing around or did something wrong, and that caused the volume to get jacked up on that stuff, but yeah, there's points where you just can't hear the characters talking at all while Mr. Toad's, like, going into a scripted story about some of his travels, and all of a sudden it's just, like, you can't hear him anything he's saying except maybe a few mumbles or letters, as he's trying to deliver dialogue, and it's just really annoying. I mean, he doesn't pop up a ton, but pops up enough that, it's going to grate on your nerves. You're like, well, what did I miss, I mean, sure, Mr. Toad's travels to, like, various parts of the world aren't very important considering we're mostly going to spend time, watching his obsession with automobiles, destroy him and bring him into trouble with the law. While, his obsession with automobile means he constantly goes like, poop, poop, in reference to a car horn, I guess, which doesn't even sound like the car horn itself, but, whatever. And then the film basically ends without him really doing the amends part in the book, where he basically goes around compensating people, for destroying their property and all that sort of stuff. The trying to avoid being sent back to jail for escaping from prison, because he was sentenced to 20 years for all his reckless driving and thievery, because he's that obsessed with automobiles. They don't cover that. Instead, we show him, hints of him being now getting a new obsession. He's moved on from automobiles to a new fad, airplanes, and the movie ends on that note. So, if you're a real stickler for the books, you might be kind of annoyed, but some might argue, that does appear to be something that happens in some of the sequels people have written, that, he gets obsessed with airplanes. So, I mean, it could be an interesting nod, I suppose, to other sequel books written by other authors, I suppose, but those more sticklers to the source material, they might argue that's a change they're not very approving of, considering how much the rest of the film does seem to stick to the book. So yeah, I'd say it's a pretty decent film if you get the version that doesn't have messed up audio, but do not get the Digiview's version because of the messed up audio. Like, there's just better versions out there. This is not one you want to have. So yeah, film itself, good. Digiview's Productions release, terrible. Until next time then. See ya.